most out of this webinar. BDO East Africa is a leader in providing audit, tax, and advisory services. It's delighted to present a series of webinars focused on the following topics. Today, we'll specifically address how to effectively manage whistleblowers as a powerful tool to confront fraud. Let's give other participants 5 minutes to join us, and then we'll kick off. In the meantime, kindly text us where you're joining us from. Tell us your name, your company you're joining from, and as we wait for the others in the next 5 minutes. So by 2:36 p.m. on the dot, we'll be starting the webinar. Kindly text me where you're joining us from. As we wait for the others to join us, kindly let's keep texting. Just tell us your name and where you're joining us from. I'm seeing our familiar faces. Wikisto Sumo, thanks for joining us. Yvonne, Indiva, thank you for joining us. Let's keep the texting where you're joining us from. Tell us your name, the company you're coming from, as we give the others the next 2 minutes to join before we kick off. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Helena from Daraja Africa. Welcome. As we give the rest a minute before we start, you can keep texting us, telling us where you're coming from. Thank you, Oscar Mla from ESL Uganda. Karibu Sebo. Thank you, Mercy from AB Morgan. You can also tweet us the city you're joining us from. Okay, great. In this webinar series, we have brought together a team of presenters and experts in the field, each with a wealth of experience and knowledge to share. So they'll guide us through a journey of understanding the complexities of fraud, employee payroll fraud, and computer forensics. These webinars are carefully designed to offer tailored solutions to the challenges organizations face today. So our webinar today zooms in on a critical role on the managing whistleblowers to confront fraud. We will explore the legal, ethical, and practical dimensions of protecting whistleblowers, ensuring a culture of openness and transparency within organizations. So without further ado, let's dive into the compelling discussion and equip ourselves with the necessary tools to combat fraud effectively. I will now hand over the reins to our first presenter, Mr. Zahir Sheikh, to guide us through the intricacies of managing our webinars in the fight against fraud. So Zahir Sheikh, next slide. Zahir Sheikh is the partner of Risk Advisory, Internal Audit and Forensic Services at BDO East Africa, covering multiple countries in East Africa, including Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. In this strategic role, he oversees the direct operations to ensure high quality service, delivery, and efficient managing across these regions. Zahir's professional journey spans an impressive 35 years, reflecting a wealth of experience and expertise. He spent 7 years in the United Kingdom while doing a private consulting business, and before that, he was a partner with KPMG for a period of 24 years. And notably, he held the position of regional manager in charge of financial advisory service at KPMG, focusing primarily on the key markets such as Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. So one of Zahir's significant accomplishments was the establishment of the first forensic practice in Kenya in the year 2000. Over time, he skillfully nurtured and expanded this initiative, transforming into a formidable team of 25 full-time forensic specialists operating across the East African region. His leadership guidance have been instrumental in building a stronger forensic presence in the region. In his roles as regional partner for both the corporate recovery and forensic service business units, Zahir has demonstrated exceptional skill and acumen. He has been directly involved in managing complex investigations and providing expert testimony in legal proceedings. Additionally, he possesses expertise in testing and designing internal control systems, arbitrating disputes, proactive fraud management services, asset tracing, anti-money laundering, ethics, and integrity building programs, fraud surveys, as well as conducting training courses in fraud risk and corporate governance. So Zahir's dynamic leadership, extensive experience, and comprehensive understanding of risk advisory, internal audit, and forensic make him a market leader and available in the East African business landscape. Zahir, you can take over. Welcome, sir.
Thanks, Joseph. Roger, if you can just go back to the slide so I can talk through the agenda. Thank you. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to be undertaking a significant journey understanding whistleblowing. We will look at some statistics from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Whistleblowing is a very serious matter, and whistleblowers face significant risks, personal risks, as well as risks to their career. and we'll look at those as well. We'll look at some of the whistleblower protection mechanisms. We will look at common types of frauds and fraudulent activities which are reported, and also misconduct which are reported by whistleblowers. We'll look at some whistleblower cases, particularly some local ones. We will also go through the benefits of effective whistleblower management. We'll go through some case studies. We will look at how we build a culture of transparency and integrity, because without this, whistleblowing doesn't work. We will look at internal reporting mechanisms and how those can be made robust. We will also look at how to conduct a successful hotline program, a whistleblowing program in your organization. We will give you an example of the technology that BDO uses for whistleblowing, in case any one of you want to have this service brought in-house, and also some ethical dilemmas in whistleblower management. And finally, we'll look at the reporting and investigation process, and we'll have some time for Q&A. We have just finalized a series of 17 webinars, which a lot of you actually participated in. And we're very glad to announce our next series of webinars starting from this one. So we're basically going to have 4 or 5 webinars in each one of our core service areas. So for example, in fraud risk, fraud management, fraud investigation, we've got a series of 4 or 5 webinars. This is the first one. We're also going to have 4 or 5 webinars in risk management and internal audit. And this is from now through to the end of June next year. So please keep your calendars ready. We will be sending you invitations through email, also through LinkedIn and through the social media. So keep that space ready. We're going to have another series of webinars on data privacy. We had 5 last year. We will have another 5 this year. We're going to have a new series of webinars on ESG, sustainability, and what that's all about. So, keep an eye on that as well. And we've also got a series of webinars for corporate finance and transaction services, valuations, and so on and so forth. So please do inform your colleagues and other people in the organization to keep an eye for these webinars. We will, of course, communicate their dates in due course, but we actually have a full calendar lined up over the next 7-8 months. And all of these webinars are going to be completely free of charge for all of our clients and anybody else who's obviously interested. So if we can just go to the first slide where I can talk about BDO. Roger? Thanks. So let me tell you a little bit about BDO. Some of you may know that we are a global organization. In fact, we're the 5th largest global assurance and advisory firm worldwide. Last year we had a turnover of $12.8 billion US. We have a global footprint. As you can see, we have offices in 164 countries. We have 1,803 offices, and we have 111,000 professional staff working for us. You can see in the little map shaded in gray, we actually have a footprint. Even in Africa, we have a very large footprint, and globally, we have a very large footprint. So basically, we are in a position to partner with yourselves wherever you are. Our member firms possess the necessary skills and training to be able to provide the full range of services. Within East Africa, we have offices in Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Rwanda and Ethiopia. We're currently opening offices in DRC as well as in Burundi, and we also have a significant presence through associates in Somalia and also in South Sudan. So we very much have a very strong East African footprint. Next slide, please. These are some of the services that we provide. You can see we provide a full range of audit services, tax services, business support services or business outsourcing services. and also a full range of advisory services. I sit within the advisory services. I lead the advisory services division, and essentially we provide internal audit and risk management, management consultancy, restructuring services, corporate finance and transaction advisory services, forensic investigations, technology advisory, including data privacy and data protection, and also ESG services. Next slide, please. So moving on with our agenda for today, essentially, what is whistleblowing? Whistleblowing, as we know, is a very powerful and it's a courageous act by individuals. It requires a lot of courage because these people are putting their careers and sometimes their personal safety on the table. Whistleblowing, it lies at the intersection of ethics, accountability, and corporate responsibility. It serves as an ethical conscience of organizations when it works. So you can actually see how ethically alive an organization is from the amount of whistleblowing that people are prepared to do in that organization. And conversely, when whistleblowing does not work, one might say that the ethical conscience of that particular organization is dead because nobody has seen it morally fit to alert anybody in charge or anyone else of any wrongdoing, whether it's fraud, it's misconduct, and so on and so forth. So it's really a barometer of the ethical conscience of an organization. Whistleblowing is more than just an act of reporting misconduct. It represents a commitment to ethical values and to the greater good. When individuals within an organization or society encounter wrongdoing, they face a profound ethical dilemma. Should they remain silent, potentially allowing unethical behavior to persist, or should they speak up? If they speak up, they risk their careers and sometimes even their personal safety as they try to expose wrongdoing. Historically, the concept of whistleblowing is not new. It has roots dating back several centuries. One of the earliest recorded instances dates back to the 18th century when sailors aboard the HMS Warring Hastings exposed the abusive treatment of crew members. Throughout history, whistleblowers have played pivotal roles in uncovering corruption, fraud, safety hazards, as well as environmental abuses. And today, in our modern era, it's even more important because organizations have become more complex. They've grown globally. You have multinational corporations, government agencies have got more lever than before. And with IT infiltrating every aspect of business and of our lives, and now with AI, the scope for unethical behavior and misconduct has just grown tremendously. So as a result, whistleblowers have become critical as watchdogs because they are the ones that hold organizations accountable for their actions. However, every whistleblower has a dilemma, and at its core, whistleblowing presents individuals with a profound moral dilemma. On the one hand, it demands unwavering courage to challenge the status quo and expose wrongdoing. On the other hand, it requires individuals to navigate the fear of retaliation, ostracism, and potential career setbacks. Understanding this dilemma is crucial for organizations in order to appreciate the ethical complexities that whistleblowers face. So let's begin our journey today and let's start exploring whistleblowing in depth. We're going to look at the mechanisms and best practices for whistleblower protection, the role of leadership, legal and ethical considerations, and we're also going to look at effective communication strategies. Our aim today is to equip you with the knowledge and insights which you need to foster a culture of integrity and ethical vigilance in your organization. Whistleblowers should not be seen as threats, but as valuable and invaluable allies in upholding ethical standards. We need to recognize the profound impact that whistleblowers have and can have in shaping a more just and responsible world. Martin Luther King is famous for having said this: our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. So, very clear, he who passively accepts evil as much is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. Some very profound sayings here, which clearly demonstrate that we shouldn't keep quiet in the face of adversity. And why is this so important? Particularly in a country like Kenya or in a region like East Africa, because as you know, our country and our economies have suffered the brunt of corruption. You know, we have constantly been in the bottom half, or is it even the bottom quarter of the most corrupt countries year after year. And it is upon every citizen and upon every organization to help to blow the whistle so that we can stem the corruption and we can basically improve the health of our nation and also improve the lives of our people. Next slide, please. So if we look at whistleblowing, there are a couple of things that we need to understand. And there are 4 key aspects that I'm going to take you through, which is confidentiality, reporting, investigation, and protection. So as far as confidentiality is concerned, this is about protecting the whistleblower's identity, because confidentiality is a cornerstone of effective whistleblowing systems. It involves safeguarding the identity of whistleblowers, ensuring that their reports remain anonymous if they so choose, and maintaining their privacy and the privacy of their information. And let's take a look at why confidentiality is so crucial. Firstly, protection from retaliation. We know whistleblowers fear retaliation from colleagues and superiors. Therefore, when we maintain confidentiality, it shields them from potential harm and it allows them to come forward without fear. Another aspect of confidentiality is when we encourage reporting. Whistleblowers are more likely to report concerns when they trust that their identities will remain confidential. This trust encourages individuals to act as ethical guardians within organizations. And we will look at how to build trust in organizations to encourage whistleblowing. Another aspect of confidentiality is the ethical obligation. We know that we need to respect the privacy of a whistleblower, and it shouldn't just be a matter of policy, but it's actually our ethical duty. It's the ethical duty of an organization to respect the privacy of the whistleblower. This, in fact, demonstrates the organization's commitment to fairness and justice. And then another aspect of confidentiality is balancing the transparency. While confidentiality is essential, it has to be balanced with transparency. Whistleblowing systems should have measures in place to protect their identities while ensuring transparency in the investigation process. Let's now look at reporting. Reporting is about empowering whistleblowers. And for this, we need diverse and accessible reporting channels. This is critical if you're going to empower the whistleblowers. Effective reporting channels will provide the individuals with options for bringing their concerns to light. So in this, you need to consider the choice and accessibility of reporting channels. You could have, for example, hotlines. You will have online platforms like the internet, like mobile platforms, and even direct reporting through supervisors or other designated officers, or even through a third party. This choice ensures that the whistleblower can use whatever method makes them most comfortable. Another aspect of reporting channels is timely reporting. You need to report timely. So if a whistleblower knows that he is safe and he is able to report concerns promptly, this increases the likelihood of addressing misconduct before it escalates. We have seen so many cases whereby, because frauds were not reported promptly, the damage to the organization was tremendous. And conversely, when frauds are reported on a timely manner, the damage can really be limited. Another aspect of reporting channels is flexibility. Different individuals may have different preferences or face unique circumstances when reporting. So, providing various channels accommodates these variations. And another aspect of reporting channels is creating awareness by promoting the reporting channels and ensuring that your employees know how to use them effectively. This is crucial because if reporting is going to work, everybody has to be aware of exactly what to do if they encounter a situation that is worthy of reporting. The other aspect of whistleblowing is investigation. And this ensures that the investigation is thorough and it is impartial, that the whistleblower is not going to be prosecuted. Quite often, what happens is the whistleblower becomes the hunted, because their identity is revealed, and then basically it kills the entire process, because if the process is seen not to be fair, it's seen to lack integrity and accountability, it won't work. The investigation has to be seen to be fair, and it must result in some sort of accountability. And the last is protection. And this is basically safeguarding the whistleblower's rights. So, protection mechanisms are essential because they will ensure that the whistleblower is shielded from any kind of retaliation or harm as a result of their whistleblowing. And these mechanisms can include policies, legal safeguards, and support structures. So safety of the whistleblower is paramount. Uh, Protection mechanisms can mitigate these risks, and they will encourage individuals to actually come forward and report misconduct. It's really important that people are made to feel that they are safe and comfortable if they are to come forward. The other aspect of protection is legal compliance. Many countries now have whistleblower protection laws. We'll see also in Kenya, although we don't have a full law, we have various aspects of whistleblowing within various laws, and my colleague will cover that. And then also it talks about, as I said before, about organizational integrity. An organization which protects whistleblowers and addresses their concerns demonstrates its commitment to ethics and integrity. And this will definitely enhance its reputation. And then the other aspect of protection is support structures. So you will find organizations need to provide support such as counseling or legal assistance to whistleblowers, because this can ease the emotional and psychological burden that they may experience as a result of whistleblowing. Next slide, please. So let me just take you very, very quickly through some statistics of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners report to the nations 2022. So the highest incidence of frauds were reported through tips. 42% of all the frauds that were examined in the study that was done by ACCA 42% of those frauds were reported through tips. And this is 3 times as high as the next most common method of reporting. And more than half of those tips came from employees. And 1/3 of the tips came from outside parties, such as customers, vendors, and competitors. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the sources, how fraud was uncovered or detected. And you can see, again, tips by far is the greatest source. And therefore, this is where you put your money. You have to create a culture, you have to create an environment, you have to create the reporting mechanisms and encourage employees to come forward and to report fraud and misconduct, because this will save your organization from the lengthy consequences of fraud. One of the statistics, in fact, we might see later on, is that nearly 5% of all revenues in any organization are lost annually through fraud. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the potential risks faced by whistleblowers. I already talked about the risk of retaliation, and this is one of the most significant risks that whistleblowers face. It's retaliation from their employers or their colleagues. And this can come in the form of harassment or even a demotion, suspension, termination, or negative performance reviews. The next consequence that they can face is isolation and ostracism. Ostracism is used to be practiced in the olden days in ancient Greek, and this is banishment without trial, where basically you don't even get a trial, you come forward and you're just banished. And a lot of whistleblowers experience this. They can experience social isolation within their workplaces. Their colleagues and their supervisors may distance themselves, making it more difficult for them to collaborate or maintain professional relationships. The next potential risk is career damage. Whistleblowers can often suffer damage to their careers. They may find it challenging to secure future employment or even advance their career within their industry, because their reputation may be tarnished if they are not adequately protected. The other thing is financial consequences. Whistleblowers may face financial hardships, especially if they lose their jobs or they face legal battles. The cost of legal representation and any potential loss of income can be significant. The other is psychological stress. The stress of whistleblowing can take a toll on individuals' mental health. Whistleblowers may experience anxiety, depression, or other psychological challenges due to the pressures they face. Another risk is legal retaliation. We've seen cases where the whistleblowers face legal challenge or counterclaims, even directly from the employers, the very people they were trying to protect. It's because you can find sometimes they are whistleblowing against the boss or against the CEO, against the owners, because they themselves are the ones perpetrating the fraud or being corrupt. And this can be very financially and emotionally draining for the whistleblower. Another one is family and personal life impact. The stress and attention that can come with whistleblowing, it can actually affect a whistleblower's personal and family life and can potentially lead to strained relationships. And the last one, which is probably the most obvious, is the loss of anonymity. Sometimes, despite the efforts to maintain anonymity, whistleblowers' identities may become known. And when they do, as you will see in the case studies, people have had to flee there for their lives. They've had to flee for their careers. They've had to flee for their country, even from their countries, just to escape from threats, which can be very, very impending. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Roger, who is going to take you through the rest of the presentation. Roger, if you're ready, you can take over from here.
Thank you, Zahir. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Roger Moher, as you've heard from Zahir. I am a colleague to Zahir. I'm a manager in his department, and I'll be taking you through the rest of the slides on whistleblowing. As Joseph mentioned earlier, please, any questions that you may have in the chat, some of them we will cover as we go through the slides. Those that we will not cover will be directly answered in a Q&A section towards the end. So after talking about the potential risks that are faced by whistleblowers that have been very clearly articulated by Zahir, the next aspect that we should consider is whistleblower protection. As Zahir mentioned, whistleblowers face many risks coming forward with their concerns, and it's imperative that organizations make sure that they provide good and robust protection to whistleblowers who come forward, so that employees are encouraged to report wrongdoing without any fear of retaliation, of reprisals. And then this will also make sure that their rights are safeguarded. There are many aspects of whistleblower protection programs, and the main ones, the four main ones, are confidential reporting, legal safeguards, awareness and training, and independent investigation. In terms of confidential reporting, this basically is to ensure that whistleblowers can report their concerns confidentially, and if they so wish, anonymously. Many whistleblowers, due to the fear of retaliation and the fear of the risk that will face, they would want to be anonymous in their reporting. So this is a key aspect of a protection program. Your organization also should establish legal safeguards. These are legal protections against retaliation. This could be job reinstatement, compensation for damages, legal remedies. Internationally, there are several acceptable standards on whistleblower protection, such as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in the US, which we will talk very briefly after in the coming slides as well. The third key aspect, key component, is awareness and training. It is imperative that the organization provides training to employees and also to management on the importance of whistleblowing, some of the protections available to whistleblowers, and the organization's commitment to non-retaliation. And on investigation, every organization, once they receive a whistleblower's report, should ensure that investigations are conducted independently and impartially to prevent any potential bias. So let's look at some of the whistleblower protection laws around the world. So as we mentioned, whistleblower protection laws play a pivotal role in ensuring that whistleblowers are protected against any forms of retaliations. Several countries have enacted some laws and safeguards to ensure that whistleblowers are protected. We just sampled a few of them around the world. The USA, for instance, as I mentioned, has the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that was implemented in 2002, and the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. These are laws and safeguards that were implemented after some very key whistleblowing reports that brought about large retaliations, and we'll cover them in the case studies as we go along. The UK has a Public Interest Disclosure Act, which protects whistleblowers who report certain types of wrongdoing. The EU has a Whistleblower Protection Directive, which sets out minimum standards for whistleblower protection. Canada, for instance, also has a Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act, which is designated specifically to protect sector employees who report wrongdoings. And South Africa as well has implemented a Protected Disclosures Act, which provides legal protections for whistleblowers. Let's look at some of the whistleblower protection laws in Kenya. Kenya currently lacks a comprehensive legal framework dedicated to safeguarding whistleblowers. However, there's some provisions scattered in the constitution and in various laws and acts that have been put in place to establish this. So, for instance, Kenya ratified the United Nations Convention on Anti-Corruption in 2003 and signed the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption in 2007. These international agreements require states to establish policies and legal mechanisms to protect whistleblowers. There's also the Bribery Act of 2016, the Anti-Corruption and Economics Crime Act of 2003, and the Public Officer Ethics Act of 2003. All these three laws provide varying levels of protection for whistleblowers and in particular state witnesses. There's also ongoing advocacy for specific whistleblower laws and frameworks. For instance, there's a Whistleblower Protection Bill of 2017 and the Protected Disclosures Bill of 2019, which are still ongoing. These are just some of the legal efforts that have been made this far in Kenya. So as Zahir had mentioned, whistleblowers play a very crucial role in uncovering a wide range of fraudulent activities. So just to clarify and make it clear for everyone, as per the SCFE, which is the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, there are three top categories, primary categories of occupational fraud, which are asset misappropriation, corruption, and financial statement fraud. Asset misappropriation, to just briefly define them, all three of them, it involves theft of or misuse of an organization's resources for personal gain. It's the most common, as you'll see in the study that they did in 2022. 86% of fraud cases fall under this category, and it causes a median loss of $100,000. An instance of asset misappropriation is maybe cash theft, fraudulent expense claims, and inventory theft. The next key types of fraud is financial statement fraud. In financial statement fraud, the perpetrator intentionally causes a material misstatement or omission in the organization's financial statements. It's the least common fraud, with 9% of fraud cases, but it causes the highest median loss at $593,000. For instance, some of the schemes under this could be falsifying revenue, understating expenses, inflating assets, creative accounting, etc. Then the last one is corruption. As many of us know, corruption involves acts of bribery, kickback, or other unethical practices whose main purpose is to gain an unfair advantage. As we've mentioned, some of the examples are bribes, kickbacks, awarding bribes to contracts, using influence for personal gain, and many other instances fraud. So now that we've understood the main areas where whistleblowers come through in terms of fraud, let's look at some of the famous case studies on whistleblowers who've come out and taken the courageous act to report the wrongdoing that they have observed. And let's look at what are the effects, the impact it had, what role the whistleblower played, the impact that it had, the consequences and legal and reputational fallout that occurred as a result of the whistleblowing, and the legacy of the whistleblower after that. And this will help us to understand whistleblowing in key. One of the first ones that many Kenyans will know is the Anglo leasing scandal. As many of us know, it's a big scandal. It's a big Kenyan scandal which unfolded in the early 2000s. It involved a series of corrupt government contracts for various services and goods that were awarded to companies that are fictitious, what we call briefcase companies, companies that were incapable of fulfilling their obligations. The scandal, of course, led to a large misappropriation of public funds. It eroded trust in the government. And the key whistleblower in this scandal is a man by the name John Githongo. John Githongo, at the time, was a permanent secretary in charge of governance and ethics. And what he did in 2006, he named in his report very key and top government officials who are involved in this scam, worth almost $600 million in approximation, which is known as the Anglo-leasing scandal. His revelations exposed corruption at the highest levels of government, and we will not in this webinar mention key names, but those of us who are around or who read the history will remember some of the names that were mentioned. And this led to a large impact on the government of Kenya in particular. There were a lot of aid cuts that happened. There were a lot of increased scrutiny on the government in terms of corruption. He faced very many safety concerns. Eventually, he had to go to exile in the UK while the investigations occurred. But in terms of the legal and reputational fallout, the government faced a lot of consequences. There were many top officials who resigned from their roles and faced investigations. But his story ended well. His legacy is a good legacy that was left in Kenya. As far as we know, he received many accolades and awards, among them being selected as one of the world's 100 most influential Africans by the London-based Africa magazine in 2015. And he also received the 2015 Allard Prize for International Integrity. Another key scandal which involved a whistleblower that occurred in Kenya is what is known as the Goldenberg scandal. It was a very big and notorious case of political corruption and economic fraud that unfolded in Kenya during the 90s. At the heart of this scandal was a scheme that aimed to exploit government subsidies meant for gold exports. It was presented on the surface like an effort to bolster Kenya's foreign currency reserves, but it turned out to be a very sophisticated fraud at the highest level of government. It involved a company, just to briefly explain it to those who may not know, it involved a company called Goldenberg International that was created for this purpose, whose leaders and stakeholders, we will not mention again their names. The company would smuggle gold into Kenya from neighboring countries, particularly DRC. But once in Kenya, the gold will be fraudulently presented as locally mined, enabling the company, Goldenberg, to receive subsidies from the government that exceeded the actual earnings from gold exports. The whistleblower in this case was a man by the name David Munyakei. He worked at the Central Bank of Kenya, and he's the one who, while he was doing his reviews, he realized he was processing payments for export of diamonds and gold, which did not exist. So he, one way or another, led the review and the exposure of this scheme. The impact of this scheme was huge. In Kenya particularly, the scheme was estimated to have cost the country an equivalent of more than 10% of their annual GDP. And not to put any numbers to it, but of course, this is hundreds of millions of shillings. It also exposed political corruption at the highest levels of government, implicating numerous politicians. The scandal eroded public trust in the government. It's one of the key scandals that exposed corruption in Kenya. Some government officials resigned, some served prison sentences, others faced fines and asset seizures. Some others' cases are still ongoing till today. His legacy was not a fortunate one, however. David was fired from the central bank. He unfortunately remained largely unemployed until his death, his sad death in 2006. However, he's a key figure in this country's history because he stood out to one of the top officials and top members of government and exposed high levels of fraud, which saved as much as the fraud had cost the country a lot of money, it also saved eventually a lot of money as well. Let's go over to South Africa and look at one of the key whistleblowers there, whose name is Wistleblowers, who had a groundbreaking report known as State Capture in 2016. State capture, for those who don't know, is the illicit control of government for personal gain by individuals of interest through the manipulation of public officials. But Madonsela at the time was South Africa's public ombudsman. She was the national ombudsman, and he did an investigation centered on the influence exerted by a family named as the Gupta family on government affairs, which included the appointment of ministers, the awarding of government contracts, and etc. They were influencing the government in making some of these decisions. She gathered evidence, conducted interviews. It was an investigation that lasted quite a while, but eventually it exposed the truth. She shed light on how the Gupta family used their relationship with the South African president to influence very many ministerial appointments and secure contracts. The investigation, of course, had a profound impact. The report revealed asset misappropriation of approximately $30 billion during the former president's time in office. The impact and reputational fallout was huge. Of course, the Gupta brothers faced a lot of legal consequences, reputational damage. There were international firms like that will not mention that were implicated in the scandal, which faced a lot of scrutiny and damage to their reputations. However, her legacy, again, is a good one. She received a lot of accolades and awards. In 2014, Time named her one of the 100 most influential people, and the ACFE also honored her with an award in 2021 known as the Percy Award. Let's go over to the US and look at some of the key and famous whistleblower case studies that occurred there. Let's start with the Enron scandal. Enron, for those who don't know, was a once highly respected and huge American energy company. It grew quickly from 1985 and becoming one of the largest energy companies at its time. But its downfall, again, began with a lot of fraudulent accounting practices. Enron engaged in what is called creative accounting, or financial engineering. And the point was to inflate its stock price while hiding losses, to conceal its debt and make sure that its stock price, kept high. And accounting firms like Arthur Andersen, approved these accounting methods. The whistleblower in this case was Sharon Watkins, the former vice president of Enron, and she exposed this fraud through an anonymous letter to the CEO. And we'll look at some of the whistleblower reporting mechanisms in the coming slides. So she exposed this to the CEO, and she warned of the accounting irregularities that were happening. Her report triggered a large chain of events that eventually led to the downfall of this huge company. Eventually, Enron filed for bankruptcy, and it was the largest corporate bankruptcies in US history at its time. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. Investors on Wall Street suffered massive financial losses because of this. The legal and reputational fallout was huge as well. Top executives, including the CEO, are convicted. The accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, also faced heavy criticism because, it had given a clean bill of health to this company. It became implicated as well. And Enron's name became synonymous with fraud, severely damaging its reputation. A legacy, of course, is a good one. From this report, the US implemented what we had mentioned earlier, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, to enhance corporate governance and financial reporting standards. She received a lot of recognition and protection from this report. Another very huge whistleblowing case study is WorldCom. WorldCom, which was led by its CEO, it started as a small telephone company that grew through a series of acquisitions in the 90s to become one of the largest telecommunication companies in the world. However, it also had a fraudulent accounting scheme that would lead to its downfall. That was headed primarily by its CEO. They would capitalize ordinary expenses on assets in the balance sheet and create fictitious revenue entries to meet Wall Street expectations to ensure that the stock price stayed high, same as Enron, and enriching the company and its executives. The whistleblower in this case was Cynthia Cooper. She was the vice president of internal audit at WorldCom at the time. She and her team of auditors, internal auditors, conducted a covert investigation that revealed approximately $3 billion in fraudulent entries, and it came to replace Enron as one of the largest corporate frauds in US history. The company eventually, because of this report, filed for bankruptcy, and it replaced Enron as the largest bankruptcy in US history. It led to a lot of investigations by the SEC, the FBI, and the US Attorney's Office. The CEO, in particular for this company, WorldCom, his name was Bernard Ebbers. He was found guilty of fraud and sentenced to 25 years in prison. A lot of the executives faced criminal penalties. Arthur Andersen, the accounting company that we had mentioned in Enron, also was implicated. It had to withdraw its audit opinion, but after this, its reputation was irreparably damaged, and it eventually fell off because of these scandals. The Cooper's legacy is a good one as well. She was, in 2002, recognized in the Time magazine as People of the Year, and she has authored a book as well, detailing some of the key strategies to do with ethics and transparency. The last one that we look at is the case of Howard Wilkinson and Danske Bank. Danske Bank was one of Denmark's largest financial institutions at the time. And the scheme began in 2007 when it acquired a small bank called Sampo Bank in Estonia that would cause or allow criminals from Russia and other countries to utilize this bank to launder billions of euros over some years. It primarily involved transferring funds from these countries through various offshore companies into Europe through this bank. The bank failed to implement adequate AML controls, anti-money laundering controls, and this allowed the suspicious transactions to go unchecked. Howard Wilkinson, the whistleblower in this case, is a former employee. He was the head of Danske Bank's trading in the Baltic. He became of these transactions and he reported them to the relevant authorities. He revealed approximately $200 billion of suspicious transactions that had flowed through this branch. This, of course, damaged the bank significantly. The share price dropped. There were a lot of regulatory penalties that it faced. The bank CEO and several high-ranking executives resigned due to the scandal's fallout. But Howard's legacy is a good one. He received a lot of recognition. He's testified before many authorities. He is a story lesser known, but of the same impact. And this just goes to show the key importance of whistleblowers, the key role that they play. It shows that the whistleblower could be anyone, could be an employee, could be someone outside, but the key aspect is to make sure that once they report, something is done about the report. And so we look at some of the benefits of effective whistleblower management. The key message that we'd like to impact in this webinar is to make sure that your organization has a key follows key advantages, follows key roles and tasks to make sure that whistleblowers are effectively managed. It should have a very well managed whistleblower program to your organization. The first one is the first benefit, of course, of whistleblower management, effective whistleblower management, is risk mitigation. The whistleblower programs lead to early detection and response, as we've seen before, to fraud, misconduct, and unethical behavior. It helps identify wrongdoing very quickly. It reduces the financial risks that an organization will occur, because once the whistleblower reports on the case, it enables early intervention, which prevents legal and financial liabilities, regulatory fines, lawsuits, and reputational damage, as we've seen in the case studies before. It also enables enhanced compliance. Some of the benefits is that effective whistleblower programs ensure that organizations adhere to legal and regulatory requirements like the laws and the acts and policies as well that are implemented within the organization. It helps with organization, it enhances organizational culture. Whistleblower programs promote a culture of transparency and accountability, signaling that unethical behavior will not be tolerated in the organization. It helps employees in morale and engagement. Employees are more likely to engage and contribute positively to an organization with an ethical work environment. It also promotes ethical leadership. Effective whistleblower management demonstrates that leaders are ethical. It inspires trust and confidence among the employees. The last key benefit is strengthened stakeholder trust. Effective whistleblower management earns credibility and a positive reputation to the organization. And this, of course, attracts investors, customers, and partners. It also promotes investor confidence. Transparent organizations are always more likely to maintain investor confidence, and this leads to better access to capital and financial stability. It also promotes a good public perception. Stakeholders such as the public, customers, and investors we've mentioned before, they perceive organizations with good whistleblower programs as responsible and trustworthy. Some of the consequences of whistleblower retaliation. Whistleblower retaliation, as we've seen in some of the case studies, and as we'll see in this case study now on the Wells Fargo Bank, is whereby it occurs when an individual who whistleblows, of course, faces adverse actions as a result of their disclosure, some of the risks that Zahir had mentioned earlier. This has, of course, repercussions for not only the whistleblower, but what we'll see in this case study is that it also has repercussions on the organizations involved. So, for instance, in this case study, in 2017, OSHA, which is the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, ordered Wells Fargo to reinstate a former bank manager who was retaliated against and terminated after his report in 2010. The whistleblower had reported instances of bank and wire fraud and illegal sales practices that went as far back as 2005. But what happened is, 4 months after his report, Wells Fargo gave him 90 days to find another position within the company. And when he was obviously unable to, he was terminated despite having very positive performance reviews. But in this case, OSHA conducted an investigation, and they found that this retaliation against the whistleblower first was illegal. Whistleblowers are protected in the US under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and to at the very least, a contributing factor in the decision to dismiss this whistleblower. For OSHA, of course, from this investigation, ordered the Wells Fargo to reinstate him, clear his personnel file, and fully compensate him for his earnings. The whistleblower received an approximate figure of $5.4 million which was, of course, one of the largest payouts to whistleblowers in history. And he was, of course, reinstated, but I think with such a payout, if it were me, I'd just stay home and enjoy the money. Now that we've seen some of the strategies in whistleblower management, let's look at how organizational culture plays a significant role in whistleblowing behavior. An organization should create a culture of transparency and integrity to make sure that whistleblowers are effectively protected and that it values, and to make sure that it values transparency and ethical conduct among its employees. Some of the key strategies to build this culture starts with leadership, what you call tone at the top. Leadership should always demonstrate ethical behavior by supporting whistleblowers, and they should communicate a zero tolerance policy for retaliation. The next one is anonymous reporting channels. As we mentioned before, whistleblowers value their confidentiality. So organizational culture should always offer anonymous reporting channels to protect whistleblower identities, and they should ensure that these channels are accessible and they're well publicized. It should also have clear policies and procedures. The organization should make sure that it establishes clear reporting procedures, whistleblower protection policies, and it should also ensure that employees understand how to report, and this is through training and awareness. You should make sure that you conduct regular training on ethics and compliance, raise awareness about the importance of whistleblowing and unethical behavior. And after this is done, you should promote prompt and fair investigations. Whistleblower reports should be investigated promptly and impartially, and should ensure that appropriate actions, including disciplinary measures and anything that comes up, should be implemented when necessary. And the last one is feedback and communication. The organization should make sure that you provide feedback to whistleblowers about the actions taken. The whistleblower should know that his report, because as Zahir had mentioned, whistleblowers face potential risks. They require immense courage to come forward. So once they come forward, they should be able to see that their report had an impact and that there's a success from their report, and this is through feedback and communication. So all these should be done and implemented within the organization. Now that we've seen how to build a culture of transparency, let's look at the practical steps to establish and maintain robust internal reporting mechanisms to make sure that whistleblowers are able to report efficiently. The first one is assessing organizational needs. So before you implement a reporting mechanism, which we will cover in the next slide, you should always conduct a thorough assessment of your organization's risks, your unique needs. You should understand your industry, your employees, how they work. You should understand also the potential compliance requirements. Compliances are different depending on the country. As we've seen, some of the laws are different in each country, and also depending on the industry. And also, you should look at historical incidents of misconduct. You should look at some of the misconducts that have been reported in your organization, and this will help you in establishing good mechanisms. You should also define, I'll just go through them very quickly. You should also define good reporting procedures, define them clearly. They should specify who to contact, how to report, what information should be provided, and how this should be done. You should also make sure that you offer anonymity. As we've said, whistleblowers require anonymity. Many of them would require to be anonymous. So you should offer anonymous reporting options. And we'll look at how to do this in the coming slides. And this is crucial to make sure that the whistleblower doesn't face retaliation. Should also develop training and education programs to educate employees about their rights and protections. Should establish a dedicated reporting channel that is easily accessible to employees. Should be a dedicated channel only for whistleblowing, not just any other channel that is used for other things like feedback and such. Should be dedicated for whistleblowing, and it should be managed by a team with the necessary expertise. Should ensure compliance with the regulatory requirements. As we mentioned, in your industry or in your country. You should communicate and promote these mechanisms throughout your organization to ensure that your employees are aware. You may have good mechanisms, but your employees don't know how to report. So you should make sure that these are promoted. And of course, feedback and continuous improvement to make sure that you improve on all the mechanisms that you've implemented. So let's look at some of the types of reporting mechanisms that you can implement in your organization. The first one is a whistleblower hotline. We'll just go through them very quickly. It's a dedicated telephone line that employees can call and report anonymously. They're typically answered and managed by a third party to ensure confidentiality. You can have an email reporting system. This is an email address where employees can send reports of misconduct or ethical violations. It allows written documentation, and again, can be monitored by designated personnel or independent parties. For instance, you can have an email like ethics@yourcompanyname.com, for where employees can send confidential reports. You can have an online portal. This can be an internal or external platform, depending on your organization, where employees can report securely. We'll look at a technology that video uses to do this. You can have an in-person reporting to the HR or the ethics officer, where the employees can meet the HR person and discuss their concerns. This is especially key in some small organizations or those with high sensitivity issues like sexual harassment and environmental damage and such and such. You can have an anonymous mailbox or a Dropbox. This was implemented before when we used to send letters. So for mailboxes, you can place them in secure locations within the organization where an employee can submit written reports. You can have a mobile app where employees can download on their smartphone. And these are some that are used, like in the US Office of Special Counsel has one for federal employees. This is especially key in maybe large and governmental organizations. You can also use third-party reporting services. You can contact a third party to receive and manage your whistleblower reports. And you can also have an ombudsman or an ethics helpline, which is an independent mediator to help employees address their concerns and escalate issues. These are mostly used again in huge and government entities. Some of the statistics on these mechanisms, as per the ACFE report, the ACFE in its report asked respondents on if they reported whistleblowing. They asked them how they're whistleblowing, how the fraud was reported. So you will see case studies, the mechanisms that were used going from 2016 to 2022 were telephone, hotline, the email, the web-based platform, the mobile, the mailed letter, and other reporting mechanisms. What you'll see is that telephone hotline has been decreasing. You'll see it started at 40% in 2016, but went down to 27% in 2022. And this is essentially because many people have taken to using email and online reporting platforms. As you see, email has been increasing, going up to the 40% in 2022 and 33%. And this shows that whistleblowers' preferred methods are changing. They're rapidly changing and evolving, especially regarding online platforms. And this should influence your decision on which mechanism you should take. Some of the considerations that you should look at for a successful reporting mechanism is, as we mentioned before, anonymity. Anonymity is the key consideration that you should look at. The SAFE conducted a study in collaboration with the Institute of Internal Auditors to identify some of the key elements for a best-in-class whistleblower reporting mechanism. They asked respondents what they think are the most important considerations for a successful program. And these are the responses. The first one, of course, as you said, is anonymity. The whistleblowers prefer their identity to remain unknown. It's the key consideration for any mechanism. The next three that are tied are awareness, follow-up, and retaliation protection. So awareness being that employees have knowledge of the program. Follow-up is that reported issues are investigated, and protection against retaliation from the on the whistleblower. The next consideration is confidentiality. These are restrictions on the disclosure of information, followed by ethical culture, where employees are encouraged to raise concerns and have trust in the process. The reporting options, as we've said before, there are many reporting mechanisms that you can implement. You don't have to implement just one, you can have 2, 3, or 4. So the options are a key consideration as well to whistleblowers. This is now looking at it from a whistleblower's perspective, to make sure that there's easy access and availability to these reporting channels, and complaints can be submitted at any time. Whistleblowers many times observe fraud by mistake or other times intentionally, but they need to be able to report in various options. Independence is a key consideration. There should be an independent third party that is neutral, that manages the hotline program and follow-ups on the reports. Stakeholder awareness is a key one, where management, audit committee, or the board demonstrate their support for the whistleblower program. And reward. Some whistleblowers, of course, consider if compensation is provided to individuals. You can consider some whistleblowers may observe fraud being perpetrated, but may not report it unless they feel like they will get some form of reward. Could be monetary, could be promotion, whichever form, or even some form of recognition. The next ones that are other considerations as well is a defined policy, a clearly defined policy on how whistleblower reports are handled. Adequate details of the issue are captured. How adequate are they captured? The KPIs on the reports are the key data tracked, reported, how the investigation's handled. What is the knowledge of the investigators who will handle the whistleblower's report? Are they qualified, or are they just someone who will not follow it and do the investigation properly? And we'll look at how to do a proper whistleblower report investigation. And of course, continuous development, that the hotline program is regularly monitored and improved on based on feedback. Let's look at leveraging technology. And this is the example that I mentioned earlier on the system that is used by BDO on whistleblowing. System provided by the partnership with BDO and EQS Integrity Line. EQS Integrity Line is a global provider of whistleblowing and compliance solutions. It offers a secure channel for whistleblowing. So this is just a screenshot, but it's a website that can be implemented in your organization. It can be on your internet or on the global internet. And so as you can see, it's a very simple system that shows the whistleblowing policies. It shows you how to report. It gives you a secure mailbox where the whistleblower can follow the report. Let me just expand it so that those of you who are watching can see. So when the whistleblower files a report, they have the option to establish a secure mailbox so they can follow the case. Even though they have reported anonymously, they can follow the report, and you can converse with the whistleblower securely with them maintaining their anonymity. This is, of course, very key with whistleblowers who want anonymity to be maintained. So the whistleblower can open their account, have their own secure password, and it's a very simple system, as you'll see here. So it's a very simple way to report. You have the option the whistleblower has the option to record their voice on the microphone, and this can go as a report. It also has the option to have a dedicated telephone line that is independently managed. The whistleblower can attach photos or other forms of documents as evidence. And it's very simple, as you see. It just five very brief questions. Are you an employee of our company? When did the incident take place? Where did it take place? which department does your report concern, and then a brief description on your report. So the more accurate the whistleblower is able to define it, the better. And if you wish to remain anonymous, if the whistleblower wishes to remain anonymous, they can tick there, and the system doesn't keep track of their data. But if they wish to be known, they can put in their contact details, and these are handled securely and confidentially. This is an example of a very brief, it's a brief example of a very good system that can be implemented for any organization to make sure that you handle whistleblowing effectively. So what are the effective communication strategies to report once you've implemented good 1, 2, 3 reporting mechanisms? How do you communicate these to your employees? So we'll look at some of the effective communication strategies. The first one is to have clear and accessible documentation. You have to ensure that the policies are clearly documented in your employee handbooks, in your codes of conduct, on the company's internet, and you can make them easily accessible to employees. You can have regular training programs to educate employees about the process and the benefits of whistleblowing. This could cover reporting procedures, protections, so that employees can know that the organization takes these reports very seriously. You can have a diverse communication channels, so you can communicate with whistleblowers through email, through newsletters, through internal websites, and any other digital methods. You can promote anonymous reporting. So you have to emphasize the ability of your mechanism being anonymous, so that employees they can trust and know that their reports will be anonymous and won't be they won't be retaliated against. You have to make sure that leadership buy-in, what we mentioned before as tone at the top. So you should make sure that you encourage leaders and senior management to support and promote the whistleblower program. And the last one is you can promote an open door policy where employees feel comfortable to discuss their concerns directly with supervisors or management before their formal reporting. It's some of the key things that we've also seen is that organizations also face some ethical dilemmas in whistleblower management. These dilemmas, of course, pose profound questions to the organizations. They are key balance in how to manage whistleblowers effectively. So there are 3 main ones that we've seen in our experience. First one is confidentiality versus transparency. The organizations normally face the ethical dilemma of balancing the need to maintain confidentiality while also protecting whistleblowers. And it ties into protecting whistleblowers and investigating claims as well. The organization has to decide on how to prioritize protecting whistleblowers from retaliation while also investigating their claims promptly. You may delay investigations to protect the whistleblower, but this will allow the misconduct to continue. So it's a very delicate balance. And the third one is anonymous reporting versus accountability. And this is a very ethical choice between allowing anonymous reporting, very anonymous reporting, where your system or mechanism doesn't actually keep any data of the whistleblower to protect their identities, but also ensuring accountability, so that the source of the report can be known. So how do you balance some of these needs? So it's a very key balance, and these are some of the dilemmas. And now let's look at the reporting and investigation process. So as you've said, since there are very key dilemmas that the organization faces, you have to make sure that you have an effective reporting and investigation process to make sure that each step is ethically guided. So the first step, of course, is the whistleblowers report. This is where whistleblowers report their concerns through a dedicated channel. The next step the organization should take is an initial assessment or review of the whistleblowers report. This is to determine the credibility and severity of the report. You may have reports where the whistleblower just reports, my colleague stole my food, or my colleague, did this or did that. So you have to look at the severity and the credibility of the report. Some of the reports may not be as credible, The third step after you've established that the report is credible and it's severe is to launch a formal investigation. So if it's warranted, you gather evidence. The investigation process is to gather evidence, you interview the relevant parties, you analyze data while maintaining ethical standards of fairness and impartiality. Forensic investigation or a fraud investigation, as we know it, is an investigation which is based on facts and not opinions. You don't express your opinion on whether you think the whistleblower's report is credible or not, or whether you think the person being investigated, is guilty or not, but you do a fact-based and ethical investigation. After you do that, this can be done, of course, by yourselves or by an independent third party. As we mentioned, independence is a very key aspect also in whistleblower management. Then the investigators will analyze the findings and reach a conclusion, regarding the veracity of the whistleblower's report, then report back to senior management or the board of directors so that they can decide on appropriate decisions and actions that they can take. And if wrongdoing is substantiated, if the whistleblower's report is credible, corrective actions are taken. So measures are implemented. This can include disciplinary measures, can include so you have to make sure that you can follow up on the corrective actions that are taken. And if absolutely necessary, you can report to the authorities. Some of the investigations will, for instance, if it has misappropriation, this is covered by a law. So you can report to the relevant authorities to take action on the implicator or the perpetrator. So the organizations should make sure throughout this process they prioritize whistleblower protection. They make sure that they conduct a thorough and unbiased investigation. They should make sure that they're impartial, that the investigation is conducted by individuals who have no stake, in the outcome and are free of conflicts of interest. If the whistleblower's report is against let's say the HR officer, it should not be the HR officer to do the investigation. It should be someone who is impartial and has no stake in the outcome. We should make sure that you gather comprehensive evidence, because some of these investigations, as we saw in the case studies, have very high impact. So you should make sure that the evidence is gathered effectively. Some of the key aspects of a fraud investigation, as we conclude on a whistleblower's report, what we call in our field the ABCs of fraud investigation, that we thought we should just share, just to give a brief description of, is accept nothing. These are the ABCs, what we call the ABCs of fraud. Accept nothing, believe no one, and confirm everything. So as we mentioned, accept nothing is as you do the investigation, it's a principle that makes sure that you approach all data and claims with skepticism. You verify all the documents and you gather concrete evidence before you make decisions. You don't just accept things that you're told and you move on without making sure that they're authentic and they are concrete. You believe no one. This is the necessity of earning trust rather than giving trust freely. So you don't just believe anyone who gives you information. You have to maintain a cautious stance towards individuals. You have to thoroughly vet all the parties that are involved, and you have to verify all information from multiple reliable sources. You may not just rely on one source to verify some of these key things. You have to verify them from reliable sources. And the third one is confirm everything. So you have to double check information to ensure its accuracy. So you have to very thoroughly validate all facts and figures and claims. You have to cross-reference information from multiple independent sources, And you also have to maintain meticulous records of all confirmations so that if your investigation is to go on to court or to the board or to any other place, you've covered all aspects and it cannot be shut down based on a small overlook. So just to conclude, we thought we should just show you a case study on a very simple whistleblowing policy by Safaricom. Of course, this is accessible online. Many companies, as we mentioned before, put their whistleblowing policies online for everyone out there to see, because whistleblowers can be people within the organization or within or outside the organization. This is a very simple policy, a very brief and simple policy that we thought we should show you as a case study, and this should maybe influence you on how to do yours as well if you have not already done it. So some of the key aspects that we have highlighted for you to see are protection. You can see the key aspect, the largest text is the key aspect is their protection, their emphasis on protecting whistleblowers. That's the first key aspect. They've shown that they treat all reports in a confidential and a sensitive manner. They have shown the responsibility to report, so the obligation on whoever who can report and whoever you can report on. And then they have given very clear reporting mechanisms. They have shown a very good emphasis on anonymity, and they have given multiple reporting mechanisms. You can see here they have an ethics hotline which is independently operated, and they have an email, a dedicated email for reporting. And they have also shown where you can report to their leaders, the CEO, the Chief Corporate Security Officer, any Chief Officer, and any member of the fraud team. So this shows what we mentioned earlier on the leadership buy-in. So I think that has been it. It was a very brief webinar, but also took a lot of time. We just wanted to cover the key aspects of whistleblowing. And we hope that from this, you will be able to implement the key aspects and key things that we have mentioned. You know, you can look at the protections that you give to whistleblowers, some of the key aspects of effective whistleblower management, how to build a culture of transparency and integrity, robust reporting mechanisms, and effective communication strategies, and the investigation process. I'll hand over to Zahir to just quickly close out, and my colleague Joseph. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Roger, for a very comprehensive presentation, which I hope that our participants have benefited from. I don't really want to add anything right now. We've run over time, actually. So maybe what we'll do is we'll take questions. Otherwise, we can close the session very quickly. So I haven't seen any questions in the chat section. If there are no other questions, we haven't seen any other questions in the chat section. If there are no questions, then I'm going to ask Joseph to close the session. Over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Zahir. Thank you, Roger. Thank you for the comprehensive webinar. Members, maybe if you have any question before I close it off. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being part of the engaging, insightful webinar that has been presented by Roger, Zahir, and myself. We hope that you found today's discussion on managing whistleblowers to confront fraud both informative and valuable. So, in the realm of forensic investigation and fraud prevention, the role of whistleblowers is pivotal. The courage to speak up against fraudulent activities plays a significant part in safeguarding organization and upholding integrity within our profession spheres. So remember, a culture that encourages transparency and accountability is the bedrock of effective fraud prevention. So as we conclude, we encourage you to take the knowledge gained today and apply it in your respective roles and organizations. So let us foster a culture that not only identifies and addresses fraudulent activities, but also cultivates an environment where individuals feel empowered to speak up against wrongdoing. So again, we extend our gratitude to our esteemed presenters who generously shared their expertise and insights. The valuable contributions have enriched our understanding of this critical subject. So again, at BDO, we offer the whistleblower policy. We provide the service. We also provide forensic investigations. If you need any further discussions or have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We value engagement and look forward to future interactions. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day ahead. I'll see you. We meet again in the next webinars. Thank you, and good evening, everyone.